Hello chess friends, this is FIDE Master Valeri Lilov and welcome to the new lecture for geekswithchess.com. And today I'd like to present a very interesting theme, and this is the secret of the successful defense. Many chess players, I have even a lot of my students basically, happen to have heard or basically have realized a lot about the attack. So they're learning an attack, they learn about ways to lead the attack, they learn about a lot of ideas of how we can make the attack more successful and more powerful. But they know very little about the power or the importance of the defense, actually. So I want to give some ideas about the defense right now, because you see, we are normal players. We're not the top grandmasters, we're not the players on the top of the world who often don't happen to defend, and even they sometimes happen to defend. So we often meet in our games positions in which we need to defend precisely, and when we know how to attack, the only thing that we can come up with is some kind of an idea for a counter-attack that very often doesn't seem to work so often, so good actually on the most of the times. And this is why I wanted to give you some ideas, some suggestions on what do you need to do, what kind of steps do you need to take in order to make your strategies to be more successful every time we need to defend. So now we have one position that is very important, valuable example. We have to look at it from the black thesis. It was actually the game played between the grandmasters Kavalik and Karpov. Karpov wasn't just a grandmaster. Anatoly Karpov was the 12th world champion and one of the strongest defending players at this time. So the game was played, and in that actual position, white seemingly leads the position with a very dangerous attack. His queen adds pressure there, the bishop is being useful, probably even the rook is going to transfer itself through the e3 to h3. And the truth is that white is going to maintain and manage quite some threats directly against the black own position, against the king, against the pawns, and these pieces which are seemingly look a little bit discoordinated. So the main question that we really need to ask ourselves is how? What should be the way, or what has to be the idea with which black can protect or defend against upcoming threats? Now, what Karpov did in this actual position, I'm going to give you some of his thinking process in particular, and then we're going to have a look at what are the ideas that he can utilize. Is the first thing that we have to ask ourselves when we are under an attack is going to be whether our opponent really has any major threats to come initially. So ask yourself, does my opponent have any immediate threats with which he wants to follow? And if he does, then think about the ways with which you can oppose against them or eventually prevent them from happening. So you have to first and foremost deal with your opponent's immediate major threats that he has in the position. If for some reason he doesn't have any major threats, then you can continue with step number 2. But first you need to ask yourself, does my opponent have immediate threats with which he can follow and make some more problems against me? Now, the good thing is that in this position there are none. The second question we have to ask when we have resolved that problem, or if we find that the opponent doesn't have immediate threats, are okay, what are my opponent's most active and advanced pieces with which he wants to create the threats, and what are the prospective threats that he wants to utilize? That's fine. No, we do this because we really want to see exactly what ideas he will prepare in order to increase his attack. And now one of the things that we find is that white would like to use e6 here. He would like to utilize the ability to after f takes e to play bishop takes e6, and even if we take it, the problem is that the rook on the 8 will be hanging. Also, another idea that could be very valuable for white could be the opportunity to move the rook around. 3e3 to g3, add pressure on g7 and become very successful. So most of white's ideas definitely seem good, and in fact he has potential. And then the third thing which we need to utilize is to ask ourselves a question: what is going to be the best way to stabilize and, as much as it's possible, fight against those opponent's pieces that seem to be most capable and threatening against our own position? So now what we see is that he's got a bishop on the f5, he's got a queen, and he's got the rook with which he can maneuver and add significant threats and pressure against black's king. So that's why the main question has to be right here: what is the best way for black to oppose against those pieces and stabilize as much as it's possible? And the unpleasant threat of pawn up to e6, which we find here, makes black to be precise. And what he did was a very important move, queen c7. Sometimes we have to utilize our strongest or most important pieces to come backwards in order to get the chance to stabilize. What black wants to do in this moment with the move of queen c7 is, as much as it's possible, to stabilize, and not only that, but also what he wants to do is get his own queen towards the e7, with which he's going to stand in front, and in the same time transfer his strongest and most important piece right onto the defense. Now, many players would not dare to make such a move because it looks very passive and it looks in some way a little bit threatening. But I'd like to say, such move needs to be played. Why? Well, it's simply because when it is already played, then the whole point is that the queen will be not only protecting at an important square, but it will be already close to get at the e7, oppose against the opponent's queen, and it will do two things. Stabilize, because the queen will be close to black's king, and it will prevent many of the white immediate or major threats which he wants to follow it, and it will be close not only to the black king, but it will prevent many of white's major threats with which he wants to attack, let's say against h7 or g7 or f7 and so forth. So when the black queen in fact came back to the c7 square, the difficulties really began. Well, what were those difficulties? Well, the first thing that that white actually played here was e6. Well, he wanted to promote his idea to open up more lines and create more threats. I think that there is no direct way how we can stop this. So, okay, white played the move of e6, and now black played the simple idea of f6. Well, that's right. We really don't look at anything more, but just a way to stabilize. Keep in mind that. As more as you stay away from the opponent's most relevant piece, like his queen, the bishop, and the rooks, and as more you choose those little moves with which you can stabilize your position and allow less threats to happen, then more and more your position becomes much better and stronger. And after continuing with the move of f6, queen h4, and now g6 was the way how black protected, everything is very, very strong. Why not? Why not white queen takes f6 right now? For what will happen in case he wins the pawn? Well, can't really do anything because we'll attack on it and the bishop is hanging. So you see, the defense doesn't require us to be very creative. It doesn't require us to really calculate a lot or have a lot of a big imagination. It only requires us to ask a couple of simple questions with which we're going to identify his immediate or eventually prospective important ideas, and what should be, or what has to be, our ways to meet them. And of course, after queen h4 now, black plays g6. Now the thing is that white needs to play the move of e7, so that he can create a threat, and he can manage bishop e6 eventually. But even after that move continued, black played rook to the d6. You know, I don't think that it really matters if we take the pawn on the e7. Black doesn't want to do any of those. But after the move of rook to e6 with which he came, the important thing is that now the stabilization has been already made very well, and most of white's threats are no longer available. Okay, white played now queen to dg3 because he wanted to attack so badly that he didn't care about anything else, and the fact is that now black gets the chance to counter him. Rook takes e7. White can't attack with only two pieces, and if he tries to, his attack is going to be broken because of black's amazing, lines, space, and control. And the fact is that after rook takes to the e7 on his own, and then, in fact, bishop takes g6, h takes to g6, queen takes g6 check, exactly as white played it. Black played the move of king back to f8, and after queen to h6 check, rook g7, of course. Let's just keep it safe. As soon as the black rook came on the g7 square, it's ready to put pressure straight against white's g2 pawn. Black's pieces are now put quite well in a good coordination, and white is just going to dream about receiving any significant opportunities. After rook g7, only this allows black to be very successful. And after moving on with queen to h8, okay, then there is rook to g8, one more check, and then black's defending. So I think that this example pretty importantly utilizes the idea that the successful defense is based not so much on a lot of factors that make a player really good one, but simple questions that any player from intermediate or even beginner level can ask himself. And because of these little questions that help us identify the target, help us identify where we are strong or where we are weak, we can continue with these secure moves like queen c7, with which we are going to fight against the opponent's most important and active piece, and we are going to stabilize our position so that he can't make or manage any more threats against our own position. That's what actually black did, and that's why his own strategy and plans became so much successful. So that's what I'd like to share with you about this actual position and the example itself. And you can try to take advantage of using these little questions. That's secret, because that's the whole secret about the defense, basically. And every time when somebody attacks against you, don't panic. Just stay still and use these questions to figure out what's the problem and how you can deal with what creates this problem, your opponent's active pieces.